Hello there and welcome to the first Q&A. It is for reaching 3,000 subscribers, and I'd like to start this video by thanking each and every one of you, not only for clicking the subscribe button, but more importantly for all the support that I've received over the last couple of years. It means a lot to me, and the channel would not be where it is without that. So thank you for everything that you've done. The first question is, how did you decide value investing is your way to go? And I think this is a great question to start with. The answer is not going to be as straightforward. I was not introduced to value investing right away. I did not start as a value investor. Instead, a little bit over a decade ago, I have started looking at all the different investing strategies, investment styles, trading styles as well. And my goal was to figure out what is the rationale behind them. So I read a lot about value investing, of course, but I did read also a lot when it comes to technical analysis. I read a lot about contrarian investing, trading, options trading, and this is the one that seemed most rational to me and the approach that I'm most comfortable with. In my opinion, to be a good long-term value investor, there are two key components. The first one is to really put the work to analyze companies, to find and bet on companies where the odds are in my favor. And I'm willing to do that, but that of course means that there will be a lot of times where I put 10, 15, 20 hours, and then the outcome is that I should not make any investments in that particular company. And the second part is I need to be disciplined and patient, and I think I have those qualities. Of course, time will tell whether I'd be personally a good value investor or not, but this is kind of my answer, why value investing and how I decided that that is the way to go. Does YouTube pay off is one of the questions that I get very often, and normally this question is being asked from a financial point of view. Does it pay off financially? And I'll come back to that, but first I'll answer it from my point of view. Does it pay off to me, and how do I get a return out of it? I get a return in many different ways. First of all, I have left the comfort zone a long time ago. I'm recording my thoughts, I'm recording my analysis, I'm sharing it with the public. I get feedback in different forms, and I appreciate that. I have improved my presentation skills, and most important of all, I have met a lot of amazing and supportive people, and I'm grateful for that. Now, if I go back to the question, does it pay off financially? In my case, I would say no, because I've made that decision, and I'll elaborate a bit more on that. Every week on average, I get 2 to 3 different offers for sponsorship and promotion deals. And I've declined all, and I'll try to elaborate a bit more on the rationale behind that. 90 to 95% of the offers relate to products or services that I personally wouldn't pay for. Whether that is products and services that have nothing to do with finance or investing, or certain trading platforms that might seem a bit shady, or platforms related to cryptocurrency or NFTs, there is no point in promoting those. The remaining 5 to 10% relate to products or services that are actually fine, but there's nothing out there for you as the viewer or the subscriber who is actually at some point going to make the purchase. And what I mean by that is these deals are normally structured in a way that they incentivize the content creator, in this case me, to make a percentage of the sale in the form of affiliate fee. That's it, but there's not much for you. And when that is the case, I don't see a reason to promote that. So I try to approach these decisions from a viewer point of view. If I'm on the other side of the screen watching this video, would I be interested in getting a discount of 30, 40, 50% on a product that adds value? And when that is not the case, I mean, I don't see a reason at the moment to accept these kind of offers. And maybe I'm fortunate enough that I don't depend on the income of the channel, and that it was not started I didn't start this channel for financial gain. So by not accepting these deals, I'm basically living somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 euros or US dollars on the table, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Now, if I take a look at the earnings from the channel itself, that would be probably between 50 and 100 euros a month. So my hourly rate is somewhere between 2 and 3 euros. So it's incredibly insignificant, but I don't do this for those reasons, and therefore I'm perfectly fine with that. If you know that you'll most likely underperform the index, why not practice your investing skills in a small account with fractional shares? This is a fair question, and I think that it is absolutely correct that majority of the investors will underperform the index, and maybe I'll fall in that category as well. Of course, there is not a lot of fun in that, and personally, I'll approach this from a different angle. I enjoy the process of researching, analyzing, and valuing companies. That helps me to increase my knowledge, and I think that knowledge compounds. So at this stage of life, that is what I'm focused on. Now, acting upon those valuations is a lot of fun. This is something that I enjoy, and I also think that it does add a bit of credibility to the channel. So investing kind of pushes me to do all of that. It pushes me to look at all kinds of different companies from different angles to really get better understanding of the businesses, and I think this knowledge ultimately will be useful outside of investing as well. What is your end goal in investing? Is it to have more free time, to leave something to your kids, or something else? Now, this question is one that took me the most time to structure my thoughts around it, because normally I do think about the next couple of years, but an end goal in investing, that seemed a bit of a more longer term, and I tried to think from these different pieces in the question. So is it to have more free time? I don't think so, because I do have a lot of free time, and in fact, this is how I decide to use it. So if I wanted the free time, I could have that, but I have to fill that free time with some activity, and this is my decision to in that regard. Now, is it something to leave to at the moment I have a daughter? I would say also not. I'm a big fan of the quote, "Give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish, feed him for a lifetime." I think my job as a parent is not so much to leave something behind, but to teach certain values, and hopefully that those values and will be useful for her in the future. So that of course doesn't answer the question, what is the end goal in investing? And I think investing, or there isn't really an end goal as such. I think I'll connect the answer of this question with the previous one. My goal throughout investing is to be exposed to a lot of different companies, to increase the knowledge that I have, and of course over time the capital as well. But to be honest, I can see myself using that capital to create something good in the world, whether that is some sort of a non-profit organization, or invest in individuals who have a certain business idea. That's something that is yet to be seen, but it's not for these reasons. At least after spending quite some time thinking about this is the best answer that I can provide at the moment. But thank you for the question. It is definitely one that made me think a bit longer term. Did you experience imposter syndrome, and if so, how did you deal with it? I love this question, and I think it is important to address it. I have experienced that for a very short period of time, and I'll share my thought process behind it and how I got over that. But I think this is something that many people face, and for some it works to focus on the objectives, the objective facts, and basically see that they are qualified, they're good enough for something. Of course, this is easier said than done, and what worked for me was flipping the equation. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail at this? What is the worst that can happen? So by answering this opposite question, it actually gave me a lot of confidence to do this. Because what is the worst thing that can happen? So first of all, I could make a mistake, but everybody makes mistakes. That is human, so that's not really that bad. I could make terrible videos, and in that case, I'll get feedback, and I can either improve on that feedback, which means I get better at something, or I can decide, hey, this is not something for me, I don't enjoy it, and then I quit. But in any case, I found out that this is not for me. So maybe I approach this from a point that failing is not that bad. It's not that serious. It's okay to fail. And how many people do you know that have started a YouTube channel and failed? Probably not many. And even if you do, it's nobody cares about that. I think that as individuals, we think, because we are with ourselves all the time, we think that we are so important and that the decisions that we make are so important, but that is rarely the case. So in my case, if I fail as a content creator, there is no impact hardly on anyone other than myself. So I'm okay with failing, but of course, if I don't give it a try, I don't even get a chance to succeed or to fail. So getting out of the comfort zone was not an easy task, but I think approaching it from a different angle helped me to kind of understand that I'm not important, I'm not so important in terms of what I do, and the worst thing that can happen isn't that bad anyway. What is the best way to learn to invest for a person with non-financial background, full-time employment, and a young family? This is a really tough question to answer, and I wish I could provide an answer that solves this equation, but there are way too many constraints, and I think there are very few professions where somebody can master a skill in that kind of environment to basically have a full-time employment and a young family. I think consistency is important, so if somebody can afford to spend an hour every day, that will compound, and when you look back a year or two from now, you can definitely see how much you've improved. But there is just no way around it. It just takes a lot of time and dedication, and I think this is the case for majority of the professions. How would one get a proper education without doing a formal study for several years? Is CFA something worth looking into? Now, the way that I'd approach this is there's so many different ways to obtain knowledge, right? It doesn't have to be a formal study. I think YouTube is a great source for knowledge, and I always recommend Professor Aswad Damodaran for those who would like to learn more when it comes to investing and valuation. I think that his way of explanation is very easy to follow, and even if somebody doesn't have a financial background, it makes sense. Now, for CFA, I've looked into it. I have thought of going through the formal study for several years. The thing is, it is a useful certification if somebody has a career in investment banking or wants to move towards that area. If that is not the case, then it's just a lot of time that will be consumed, and if you don't use it later on, then it's a waste of time basically. But what I can recommend, and again, the question was asked in a way that it's about getting an education without doing a formal study. You can always get the books, the CFA books, you can purchase them, and it doesn't have to be CFA, it could be any formal study, and then you can only focus on the chapters where you get value. So if, for example, you don't care much about bonds, give that whole chapter. I think that in today's world, there's so many different channels, and at some point it can be overwhelming because there is a lot of different sources to learn from. So you need to find what works for you, whether that is reading books or watching videos or maybe audiobooks, whatever that may be. And I'll link this to the previous question. I think being disciplined and consistent really goes a long way. Building that kind of a habit to improve. I mean, if somebody has that, then the job is done when it comes to improving the knowledge over time. What are some of your best study tips? I'm sure I'm not the only one studying for challenging certification exam. I'll share my approach. I'm not sure if it will work for you, but it works for me. But before I get into that, I wish you lots of success studying, and I hope that you passed your exams. Now, when I go through the study material, my focus is on understanding the content by trying to find the logic behind it. In addition, I want to look at it from another angle, and that is this something that will be useful for me in the future? And I'll give one example of what I don't study, what I skip, and then the way I study. So for this particular example, I will go back to my university days. I was going through a book related to audit. And on the first few pages, there were probably 50 different definitions of audit. And the goal was to explain how the definition was changing over time and what different people in different ages thought about it. Now, there is no way I'm going to memorize 50 definitions, and I don't care if there's going to be 1, 2, 5, 10 questions on the exam. The usefulness of memorizing that, well, it isn't there, right? I've never been asked, can you provide a definition of what audit is from the 1500s? So I try to avoid memorizing sentences as if that's the approach that I take, at some point I'll forget that. Now, if we're talking about a finance or accounting subject, normally the study material is divided in two parts. There's the theoretical part where a certain concept is being explained, and then there are some exercises where we get to practice and basically get a feedback if you understand the theory well enough or not. So I always start with the theory. I try to understand how the person who wrote that came to that conclusion, And once I understand the concept, it's much easier to tackle the exercises. I normally go once through the entire material just to familiarize myself with it, to understand what is ahead of me, what I'd have to study, to plan my time accordingly. And once I have done that, let's say the first time I do the revision, well, I'm not going to go through all the chapters because some of them I've already understood. So when that is the case, the study point from the study book, for example, the theoretical part, I can skip. I don't have to repeat that. The exercises, I will do a couple just to get a feedback that I really do understand that part. Then, for example, the second time that I revise, there will be a lot less chapters and so on. So the first time it takes me the most to go through the material. Second time it takes me a lot less. The third time it takes me a lot less, and so on. And I go through it as many times as necessary until I really understand the content. But I like to point out that I just really dislike memorizing definitions. I think ultimately it is important that you are able to describe certain concept, to define it with your own words. In my career, that's roughly 10 years, I've never been asked for a formal definition, but I've been asked plenty of times to explain something. And I think focusing on understanding the concept is way more important and way more useful than memorizing stuff that you're anyway not going to use in the future. I don't know if this helps or not, but this is my approach, and again, I wish you lots of success with your studies. What kind of music do you listen to? The genres of music that I listen to varies. I can listen to all kinds of music. It depends on the mood, it depends on the people around me. But if I'm alone, most of the times it's either rock, metal, or heavy metal, so I like this heavy stuff. I listen to Slipknot, Rage Against the Machine, Nightwish, System of a Down, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, Queen. Of course, I can occasionally put some blues music on, some jazz music on. Again, it depends on the mood, but most of the times it's something that's a bit more upbeat and a bit more hard. And for some, it's difficult maybe to listen to, but it really gets me into the right mood for whatever it is that I'm doing. What are your favorite books? The two books that come to mind are not related to finance. The first one is Animal Farm, written by George Orwell. It is a satirical book, and I think the author did a great job to describe the world that we live in through an animal farm where every animal represents a certain part of the population. The second book would be Outliers, The Story of Success, written by Malcolm Gladwell. It is a great book filled with a lot of examples of factors that determine the success or failure of certain individuals. I think one of my favorite examples is the one with hockey players. The month in which an individual is born has an impact on its success in hockey, and as strange as it seems, because statistically, if we take a look at all the professional hockey players, if we take a look at the month that they were born in, basically we should see an even distribution, right? That would be the expectation, but that's not the case. Majority are being born at the beginning of the year, then as you go to the later months of the year, there are less and less players as a percentage of the total. And it seems like a strange phenomenon, but it can be explained because normally the generations that the way that the hockey leagues, and this is same for a lot of other sports, are structured is if you're born, for example, in 1990, then maybe your category, your generation is 1990 and 1991. So you have 2 years of individuals playing in the same category. But imagine if you were born in January 1990 and you're competing with others who were born in December of 1991, then you have a difference of 2 years. And this can be a significant difference if you're, for example, at the age of 6 or 7 or 8, right? There's this physical difference will make one player stand out and be seen as a much better one, but it's purely because it is ahead of its development, and it gets more attention, it gets more personal training maybe and then this gap between the two expands even more. I think it's an interesting example of how something that is not within our control can control or cannot have an impact on the potential for our success. And this is just one of the many examples. Would you prefer to shrink yourself to 5 centimeters or grow yourself to 500 feet or 150 meters, and why? This was probably the most unexpected question, but in any case, I'll try to share my thoughts. I think in both options, life would be tough. If I choose to grow myself then I don't think I'll survive for too long. On one side, the quantity of food that I'll need will be massive, and I don't know if you've seen Godzilla, but anyone of that size would be perceived as a threat, so it would be difficult to survive at that size. But on the other side, if I shrink myself to 5 centimeters, that would be quite difficult as well. There would not be struggle when it comes to food, but I'll have to figure out how to survive against all kind of animals. And I think that seems a bit more fun, so I would go for the option to shrink myself. Thank you very much for the questions. I hope that you enjoyed this Q&A session. Thank you for following this video until the very end. And as always, in the next one.